Welcome back. It's the SilmFilm Script Discussion Season 2, back to Episode 2, Part 3. I can count all by myself today. So, we've changed our protagonist from Omo to Varda, which I think is a good change. I think it's a promising change. I don't think Varda gets enough screen time in our series. So, we're going to change that. And it
allows Omo to be his curmudgeonly, grumpy self without really changing very much, which is wonderful.
Right. He can have a much longer season
much
arc, so that we don't need to resolve his story in this episode.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, what we could do is when the ambassadors are in Valinor, when they get there, we can have a conversation between Omo and Varda where he's like, you need to talk to Manwë. He doesn't listen to me. This is all going to end in tears. I just know it.
You've been hanging out with Nienna too long.
And she says, you know what? You might be right. I'll talk to him.
Yeah.
So that can be one of the plot point things that goes along.
Right. Exactly.
And then
Alex could tell us which act that needs to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sort of sets her up as the person who listens to, it's her thing, listening. So I like that.
Well, I mean, I think it's a Manwë Varda team thing. Like we did a lot of season to really make Manwë a deliberate and sensitive leader, and I would like actually to flip that a little bit if we can in this episode and make him kind of seem a little more distant and inscrutable, and have it be from Varda's perspective, where she is going around being the sensitive, listening one. Not that Manwë isn't per se, but we just don't have the perspective that we had in the first season, where we're kind of like perched on his shoulder, watching him listen to everybody. Now he's kind of a sort of inscrutable is the word I would use.
We have a problem.
I think that's fair.
What is our problem?
We have a problem. So
3 times.
It's not a huge problem, but it's a problem.
All right.
So here's the problem. We're going to have this conversation. We're going to have the conversation on the battlefield of the war to begin all wars.
Mm-hmm.
Then Orome is going to go back to Cuivenin. We're going to spend a while there with him without revisiting our main plot or establishing what our plot is.
I don't think we have to cut back we don't have to follow Orome directly back. We can cut to that later. I would rather go back to Valinor with everybody first.
Okay. All right. So you're saying Orome leaves their presence.
Yeah.
To go do his thing.
We'll cut to him later.
We do a bunny sled ride to Valinor.
Let's a pan fade. We'll do a pan fade. That suggests the passage of something. Time, distance, whatever.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure any reference to bunny sleds means we faded and didn't show it.
All right, making sure.
I'm just saying that we may have an issue there. I typically like to space scenes where that's going to happen with something in between them. Just saying. But structurally, the next conversation that we need to have is the conversation between Omo and Varda.
Right.
Is it though?
Well, how else do you establish the conflict?
We could go to Cuivenin before Orome gets there, and do some introductions and world building with. Because we were at Cuivenin last episode, right? And that was mostly Cuivenin. All right, so we kind of know everybody. If we've just done the throne room, we kind of have to go back to our elf people.
No, I'm on board with that. Okay.
But
so what we could do,
we would do it before Like, they need to be freaking out about what just happened with the war, basically.
All right. Well, no, we already did that. We already did that in episode 1.
But now the war's over, and they're like, so what is now? What? Like that.
Well, again, we did all that. We did all that in episode 1. Yes.
I have to read the thing again.
We did all that in episode 1 because Orome arrives in Cuivenin the second time after the conversation that we're depicting in this episode. In episode 1.
In episode 1. Okay, so what we would do then, what I would do is, well, he arrives at the end of that, right? And like that's the where that scene ends.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Okay. What we could do is we can follow Orome back to Cuivenin, but only show like a short scene of him being among the elves and interacting with them, but before we then go back to Valinor.
I don't like that. Well, there's nothing to that scene other than, hey, look, the god among ants.
Okay, well, maybe he can deliver the invitation and select the ambassadors, so that it moves the story somewhere, and then go back to Valinor, and then after we have the conversation between Varda and Olmo, we can go to the ambassadors leaving Cuivenin, which solves our transportation problem and solves.
I guess I don't hate that. Does anybody hate that? I'm very like at this stage I'm to the point where it's like, well, I don't loathe it, so I guess it's fine.
Well, I guess what I need to understand is if it matters if we introduce the conflict with or without the protagonist present.
That's pretty important.
What do we do with the elves?
Right. Well, because if the idea is that Varda doesn't agree with Manwë, and that's going to be our main conflict,
right?
But she doesn't speak up at the debate,
right?
Then I'm not sure how we.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Show that, but if the conflict is should the elves come to Valinor or not, then obviously we've introduced it in the debate, and we've introduced it with the elves at Cuivenin. So we're introducing all over the place. If the main conflict is should the elves come to Valinor.
I don't think those things. I don't think those two things are necessarily separate, though. Like,
right, because Varda is answering this question for herself,
right,
and we're seeing this question
Varda
through her eyes.
Way is an elaboration on the question of like it's a very personal angle on the question of should the elves come to Valinor or should they stay in Middle-earth?
Well, in that case,
the answer is both of those things.
Both of those things are true. They will, as always with elves, they will say both no and yes.
And this is why, because it turns out that they shouldn't have said yes or no.
Exactly.
Because they're elves.
Or they should have said both.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I don't hate it. I still feel like there's maybe another scene that we could cut to before we get to Cuivenin and then have Varda's elaboration and make it sort of her, like establish her sort of clearly. But I don't know what that scene is yet. It has not come to me.
Oh, okay. That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. No. So in absence of smarter people who know the answer to that question, we will just have to go with your suggestion, which I do not loathe. So.
Another question is, are we going to have the Valar bring up the possibility of moving themselves back to Middle-earth in that opening debate?
Yes.
Or is that something that comes up later?
I don't think in the initial debate, no.
I think that they would. I think that they would. I just think that Aule is going to put the kibosh on it.
Oh, I know it's going to get nixed. The question is it even brought up?
That's meaty Act 2 stuff. That's not going to... Yeah.
Get an Act 2 as well.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody's going to need to remind Yavanna that she would have to leave the trees to move to Middle-earth. if she's standing right underneath the
trees. I don't
trees.
think anybody's going to ever remind Yavanna about the trees ever. Like that is not the correct angle to take.
Okay,
like,
so
Yavanna,
then she's never
Yavanna
gonna.
herself needs to be not equivocating, not introduced to the idea that, you know what I'm saying? Like she needs
remember
to be like,
that Yavanna loves Middle Earth.
Right.
Yeah.
So she can bring up the idea of we could move there.
I like
she
that.
knows the trees are here, but she's thinking in her mind she would just come visit the trees all the time.
Like
I mean, it's not like she can't afford the cab fare or something. So
well, okay, all right. So Aule's response to that could just be, well, yeah, you'd be able to come back all the time, but don't you want the elves to see it?
Exactly.
Because Aule's a maker, and what good is making stuff if people never see it?
Right.
Exactly. And I mean, I think Yavanna should be on both sides of the issue, like the whole episode, really. Like she's like, oh, it would be really great if this, but also this over here. Like Yavanna should really, really personify the problem, which
the
is
both and thing.
Well, up to this point, like physics hasn't really been so much of an issue for anybody, right? But now we're at the point where like, well, we can't just, get them over here as fast as we would go because that'll turn their brains will mush against the inside of their skulls and they'll be dead. Like, this isn't going to work the way it's been working so far.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not like they haven't had experience with mortal creatures. They have. They just smashed a bunch of them.
Right, but that's a very different context from like the world is a very big place and all of it is awesome and we get to experience all of it whenever we want.
Right.
And now we have these people that have tiny little baby legs and it takes them a long time to get places. Like,
maybe
you know what I'm saying?
Like subtitle for the episode: Tiny Little Baby Leg Problems.
Tiny little baby legs.
Tiny little baby legs.
Elway's like the tallest elf ever, too.
Yeah, but standing next to, Aule, who I imagine is sort of shorter than everybody else, he's still a tiny little baby person.
Well, also the elves can't just, whoosh from one place to another, which that the Valar probably can.
Yeah.
If they so desire.
And so, I mean, Yavanna's sort of like even
the problem is the elves are too slow.
Yeah, basically, like that is a very legitimate complaint.
Especially the Teleri.
Yeah, like they're the ultimate slowpokes. Like Yavanna's problem is not just they can't go to Valinor and see the trees. Yavanna's problem is like, oh, but in the north we have the evergreens, but then further south we have the steaming jungles, and like you can't be everywhere at once. And all of her, it's the same as any other sort of regional environmental thing, right? You have all these different regions, and even within the same region, you have all of these different tiny little ecosystems, and she loves all of that stuff.
In every wood and every spring, there is a different green.
Yeah, and so she's going to be going like, man, this is an impossible question because they need to be everywhere, but I want them to be in all of these specific places, enjoying all of these specific things. Like, how do I?
So many trees, so little time.
What?
I think I like better. I think really gets to the heart of that problem.
Oh, it's more like Hey, we got our Monty Python reference in.
Yay!
Get together until someone says Monty Python.
All right. So we got to get out of Act 1 here.
But it's so crazy.
All right, so Orome is inviting ambassadors. Does he choose the ambassadors, or does he invite some elves to come with him? Whose decision is it?
Well, I think that because the elves haven't, there's not a huge hierarchy amongst the elves yet. Right. So he's choosing them, which is why they become the kings.
I dislike that even more than Ingwe is an original made elf. I would like for this to be the first moment of agency that the elves actually get, is choosing their representatives.
Yes, but we're not focusing on them.
I know, but
they're the B plot.
We're baton passing in this episode, right? Like this is the episode where we pass the baton. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
One reason I would like
the only thing they're gonna get this episode because we're cutting so much of what was their episode. Like we gotta give them something.
All right. So that's
sorry, I talked over you.
That's fine.
Somebody had something to say.
Maria.
Oh, the one reason to let the elves decide is that then we can make something of Finwë deciding to go. And it doesn't have to be Finwë versus Muriel, or anything. It can be Finwë saying, this whole thing has sounded a little suspicious to me, but I'm going to go along anyway to see what's really up here.
Yeah.
So that gives him some agency.
Marie knows what's up.
What?
I said Marie knows what's up. I like where your head's at.
Karita, are you muting yourself right now?
Yes, she's talking to somebody.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure.
Somebody very
very important somebody.
Bearded.
Yes. All right. Ooh.
So, I was listening.
All right. So that's cool. So we have to figure out. All right. So here's what we could do. We could show the selection of the ambassadors then in Act 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we need to get to establishing what Varda's conflict.
Mm-hmm. Do we want to make a big deal out of the? I kind of think the only scene there really is a conversation between the three ambassadors. Well, because as I seem to recall, we had the three ambassadors like rowing across the lake to meet Orome, and that's where we ended episode 1, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess that scene actually doesn't really change that much. Then they go across.
No, that's episode 1. Yeah, they're fine with that.
Well, but I think we had a scene where we finished that scene. Basically, they row across the lake and bring him.
And they meet Orome.
Yeah, they meet Orome. They ask him what's up, and then I guess we can cut to Valinor after that, and then cut back and have them discussing the invitation. Not just the three of them, but like they're kind of leading the discussion.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Does that work? Everybody
yes.
Okay with that?
I'm fine with that. And they are selected by their peers.
Yeah. They're like, well, you guys talk to them, so...
I mean...
I think it would be really funny if we had a scene where, like, they're like, so who's going to go? And everyone steps back, except,
Yeah, I remember... didn't you mention that in the... Didn't you mention that in the during the podcast? Originally?
I probably did. I have no original thoughts. I'm sorry.
No, it was... If you did, then it was still your idea, so... Yeah.
I'll take credit for it.
Sounds good.
I'm not serious. I think it would be funny as an outtake.
Yes, it would be funny as an outtake. We're not doing it, but
why not?
I do feel
1, 2, 3, not it.
I do feel like, however, we need to address because I don't think that we're actually like they're not voting.
No,
they're not. Yeah, it's a
like
tribal elders discussion basically.
Right, like somebody puts like people name say, yeah, you and you and you, and everyone's like, yeah,
right.
We're not going
voting.
Well, I mean, somebody should straight up say that to them, like you guys talk to him, like, you should. Keep
you guys know him best.
Yeah, like you invited him in here. You might. All this is your fault anyway, so. Take responsibility, you schmucks.
I think they would word it more as we trust you to blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, like, among the dissenters who think this is a terrible idea, like, somebody should probably be like, sure, if you want those guys to do it, yeah, get them out of here.
This
I don't think that's
an interesting
that's
question. The interesting question is, what is Quenya for schmuck?
Now I will not rest until I can figure out how to translate it properly.
Thank you.
I'm sure.
It requires. There's one of the parts of one of the things that's in the word schmuck is not something that there's a Quenya word for.
Exactly. Are you sure about that?
Well, not one that Tolkien made.
When has that ever been?
That though I did find a way to translate smartass. So. I translated it as wise rear.
Which is why it's got to sound like a flower's name anyway, because that's just how the language
Yeah, I think it's like Saire Tole or something like that. It sounds like a flower.
Beautiful.
All right, anyway. So on that note, we're going to take another break. This has been the SilmFilm Script Discussion Season 2, Episode 2 again, Part 3. If you're watching this on YouTube in the future, please like and share the videos. If you like and want to share them, it does help us out quite a lot, even if it doesn't look like it. And if you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe.
That's the spirit.
If you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe. We'll be back in a minute.